I'm so happy to have you on this wonderful interview. And I heard you the last session and I heard your presentation, thought-provoking. But before we go into that, can you tell us about yourself and the institution you work for?
Sure. Look, it's a pleasure and honor to be here back in Nigeria, a place I consider as a home as well. My name is OMER SHAIKH. I sit on the board of the UK Islamic Finance Council, and I also sit as a director at the Global Ethical Finance Initiative. So I have, interestingly, two lenses. One is Islamic finance, and the other one is mainstream, sustainable and responsible finance. Been in financial services over 20 years, former head of Islamic finance for EY in London, and been involved in the industry for maybe 14 odd years now.
That's wonderful. And combining just these two things together, looking at Islamic finance and the other side of sustainability, is so interesting. I'll just ask you, when you saw a kind of email from the organizers of this conference, and you looked through and you saw the theme towards just transition, what came to your mind immediately?
I was super happy it said that, because as I've just explained, I'm working on sustainable green finance and Islamic finance. So bringing the sustainability agenda to the heart of Islamic finance is critical. And at this forum, one of the biggest, most important forums across Africa here, that's been running for well over a decade now, I was extremely pleased to see that conversation was happening here. Sometimes Islamic finance is doing its own thing, talking in its own world, but one of the biggest conversations globally in banking and financial markets is around the just transition. If we have any chance whatsoever of addressing the climate crisis or reaching the nationally determined contributions, we have to look at transition finance, and we have to ensure that transition finance works for everyone and therefore is inclusive and is just. So super happy that's been the key underpinning theme throughout the last 2 days.
I know we've had several discussions, different perspectives coming up. People saying moving from, the conventional way of banking to Islamic banking, moving from fossil to green. We even have a perspective from, the gender issue. So, thank you so much for bringing your own perspective into this. But I want to ask you something. This is sustainability and, Islamic finance. Where do they meet? Where do they cross? Is there any harmonization or something that we can actually draw?
Yeah, so that's a beautiful question. And to me, that sits at the heart of a lot of my inquiries and exploration over the last decade plus. A couple of different ways of looking at this. And I like to frame it with tayyib. In Quran, it says halal and tayyib over 40 times. And that principle of gradation in Islam, that principle of not just being halal, but also being something which is pure, wholesome, and progressive, that tayyib piece. So that's how I frame my understanding, my thinking of where the two connect. Islamic finance, of course, as an industry is driven and underpinned by Sharia. Sharia has a maqasid. There is an Islamic understanding of wealth, of profit. It's not just a case that Islamic banking should simply replicate conventional banking. We should make a halal version of the existing. That has been the first phase, and has successfully happened around the world. And the early pioneers have done a lot of hard work in the last 40, nearly 50 years to do this, from Malaysia to the GCC to the UK, etc., to give the Muslim community an alternative option. However, we can't stop there. We can't just replicate the conventional. We need to ask, particularly now, as I said on stage, post-global financial crisis, what is the purpose of banking? Is the system we've got fair? Does it work for everybody? Is it inclusive? Do we take account of the negative externalities and what we finance? So, for example, the carbon emissions, the nature biodiversity loss, all of these things. And these are questions which mainstream finance is now beginning to ask over the last 6-7 years, but actually sit at the essence and at the heart of Islamic finance as well. The letter of the law, the spirit of the law was always the debate. So if you see Islamic finance, you cannot decouple it. You cannot have Islamic banking as a structured, synthetic, legally engineered form without an understanding of the Islamic purpose of the economy, Islamic understanding of wealth, of profit, of hisab, of accountability. of barakah. I always used to say you can't put barakah into an Excel sheet. This was a narrative, a conversation people would laugh at me at. What are you talking about? This is all about profit. This is all about making money. This is all about making a Sharia compliant alternative. And I'd say, yes, I understand what you're saying. But there's also something called barakah, which now we're beginning to talk about in Western markets as purpose. There has to be a purpose as well, profit and purpose. We're talking about stakeholder capitalism where everyone's included. We're talking about beyond growth. So some of these fundamental principles which have underpinned our economic theories over the last century or so are being reconfigured in contemporary ways. But these are actually sit at the heart of what Islamic finance and Islamic philosophy was always about anyway. So there's a beautiful intersectionality there. There's a lovely space. And actually there's a simple realization that, number one, the world is not all about profit. But number two, it's not the case that you make less profit by being purposeful. Actually, if anything, the business case is even more robust, more resilient, and more successful over the medium to long term, you know? So you can bring the two together. It's not two different conversations.
I mean, I love the way you bring and then you articulate this wonderful thing. I mean, when you mention profit and purpose, I mean, these are very, very key to, I mean, everything we do. So I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for being on this wonderful, interview with us. I believe whenever we call you next, you are going to answer us.
Inshallah. Look, it's a pleasure. It's lovely to come back to Nigeria, to see old friends, and really, really a huge well done to the whole team at MetSkills, at AICF.
Thank you.
Because this is so important, convening stakeholders, taking stock of where we got to. But I like the fact that you had progressive conversations and you had frank, honest conversations as well. So well done.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.